This is a sports catastrophe production. Hey there, how there, ho there. It's Jeff Cutter Diamond welcoming you to another sports catastrophe on this day. And on this day, August the 1st, we start a brand new month. In 1976, both the Montreal Olympics ended on this day. But I'm not talking about the Montreal Olympics because, it just doesn't seem good and all that. Well, this time I'm talking about this guy. Now, the picture looks a little bit awkward, but basically, it must be said. This is Niki Lauda, who was an Austrian F1 driver. I always thought he was from Finland. He was actually an aviation entrepreneur and would actually run 3 airlines: Lauda Air, Niki, and Lauda. So anyway, Niki Lauda was a 3-time F1 champion, 75, 77, and 84, and the only driver in F1 history to be champion for both Ferrari and McLaren, which was shocking. So anyway, he seemed to be the star driver of F1 after the 75 season, but of course, he had that famous crash at the 1976 German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring. His Ferrari burst into flames and he almost died because he inhaled toxic fumes and had severe burns. He would survive and would race 6 weeks later at the Italian Grand Prix. He didn't win the World Championship. He was off by a point. He still came in. He had a few years hiatus, and then somehow he won the 84 title. So anyway, Lauda was a huge driver, winning the 1975 championship. And Lauda did dominate the start of the 76 season, winning 4 of the first 6 races and finishing second in the other 2. He basically had another world championship being a formality because he had more than double the points of his closest challengers, that being Hunt and Jody Scheckter. Trying to become the first guy to go back-to-back since 1960. And he was trying to win the most races in the year, breaking Jim Clark's 1963 mark. A week before the German Grand Prix at Nürburgring, he said that the fellow drivers should boycott the race because of the 23-kilometer circuit safety arrangements. Because the organizers didn't have a lack of resources to manage a huge circuit, lack of fire marshals, fire equipment, and safety vehicles. F1 was really dangerous. But the drivers didn't want to boycott, and the race went ahead of schedule. So, on the second lap, Lauda was involved in an accident when his Ferrari swerved off the track, hit an embankment, burst into flames, and made contact with Brett Lunger's car. Unlike Lunger, Lauda was trapped in his wreckage. 4 drivers arrived at the scene to try to pull Lauda out of his car. But he had severe burns to his head and inhaled hot gases that could damage his lungs and ruin his blood. Anyway, Lauda was wearing a modified helmet and it didn't fit him properly. The foam actually compressed and it slid off his head after the accident, leaving his face exposed to the fire. Although Lauda was conscious and able to stand immediately after the accident, he got into a coma. He was given the last rites, but he survived. So he would have the extensive scarring from the burns to his head, losing most of his right ear as well as the hair on the right side of his head, his eyebrows, and his eyelids. He wanted reconstructive surgery just on his eyelids and getting them to work properly. After the accident, he always wore a cap to cover the scars on his head. Carlos Reutemann was put in the Ferrari with Lauda out. Ferrari would boycott the Austrian Grand Prix. Lauda would only miss 2 races, thankfully enough, appearing at the Monza press conference. It was burns still managed, but he still took part in the Italian Grand Prix and took 4th. He was petrified. So Lauda had to have the blood-soaked bandages off his scalp, and he also would have to wear a specially adapted crouch helmet. With Lauda out, Hunt made a charge to reduce Lauda's lead in the World Championship standings. Hunt and Lauda were actually friends outside the circuit, which was weird. So after Hunt took the Canadian and the US Grand Prix, he was only 3 points back of Lauda before the final race in Japan. Lauda qualified third, but there was torrential rain, and Lauda didn't want to risk anything, so he had to leave after 2 laps. He said he couldn't, it was really unsafe. Hunt would actually finish third in the race and win the championship by a point. It was kind of pathetic. All that. Lauda wasn't too comfortable with Ferrari. Like the good relationship with Ferrari was soiled because of him withdrawing from the Japanese Grand Prix after 2 laps. When he won the US Grand Prix to win the 1977 title, he decided to step down from Ferrari because of the team's decision to run Gilles Villeneuve in a third car at the Canadian Grand Prix. So he would join the Brabham thing. He would win the famous 1978 Swedish Grand Prix in which Ronnie Peterson... No, he won the Swedish Grand Prix. So, yeah. Lauda seemed to not do so well. He decided to retire after the 79 Canadian Grand Prix. Lauda would run an airline for 2 years and then came back to racing for $3 million with McLaren. Yeah. There was a driver's strike he organized because of the super license problems. And the drivers won the fight and all that. So Lauda won the 84 championship by half a point because the 84 Monaco Grand Prix was shortened and they gave half points. So Lauda and Prost were fighting in 84. It was shocking that Lauda even came back from a seemingly death knell, being burned in an accident and becoming an F1 footnote for drivers who died. But no, he didn't. He survived everything. It was shocking to see, and he was a spokesperson for F1. He didn't look that great. He wasn't good looking anymore. But, it doesn't matter. He's still a race driver through and through. And his persistence paid off. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. Adu.